what would be considered by most people tragedy or something that is going to hold them down for the rest of their life into a way of helping others. So I don't think it defines who you are, but I think it is a major medal to wear on the chest, is the way I look at it.
It's an interesting perspective. Hey, it's good to see you, Chad.
Hey, you too, Jamie.
Yeah.
Before we get into things too far, I've got someone who has been wanting to talk to you for a long time. Good friend, beautiful person. And I believe that they would like to express to you what the DSR has done for them. And I thought that this would be an amazing way to start it off. And I saw her in the chat and I was like, wait a minute, she's been telling me for a long time she wanted to talk to you.
Wow.
And I thought that it would be just perfect to start this off and just let you know what kind of impact you really have on people. So please welcome our dear friend Cheryl here.
Hey.
Hey, man.
Hi, how are you?
Last time you saw me, I was dressed as a nun. Oh, God, I'm getting emotional already.
I thought you were a nun.
Well,
all right.
Yeah.
Your business, that's what she is.
Okay, all right.
Regular.
Yeah.
Cheryl, you're coming in a little bit low, hon.
I am?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what to do about that. Should I just get closer? Is that better?
Just talk a little louder. There you go.
Okay.
No. So you've been wanting me to get you in touch with Jamie, and I thought,
Good.
here we go.
There it is.
Nice.
You saved my life, and I just want to thank you because half an hour, once a week, 3 times in the neck, and I am a completely different person. I'm still a bit emotional, but, you know, we all need a little work. I just need to do a little talk work. But this book and you, sir, have done what no one else could do. And I've paid a lot of money to a lot of people. I had my ancestors' karma cleansed. I've done everything. My dad was a Scientologist, so I suffered a bit from Scientology too. But I just want to really thank you. And I'm going to do everything I can to disseminate this message and these shots and let everyone know about your book as much as I can. Because I know there are so many people out there that could use this help. It's very simple. It's non-intrusive. But it really does help. It helps immensely. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I really, really appreciate it. And you're very, very welcome. It's science. And I didn't invent it. But I will say what I hope to do, and I hope that I have done and want to do, is take it away from, not take it away, but expand it away, out of just the extremes of the special forces and first responders. And I mean, even guys like John that, you know, most police officers that I talk to never even heard of this thing. Okay. And then talk about carrying allostatic load. So I wanted to kind of expand it out of the fringes and bring it to the living room. Yoga instructors, kindergarten teachers, nuns, right?
Nuns are traumatized too.
Plumbers.
There's a reason we become nuns.
Yeah, plumbers, CEOs,
and
everyone. So that's that. Yeah.
Don't forget hippie chicks living in Florida.
Hippie chicks living in Florida. So if I'm, you know, my hopefully my contribution, you know, is to see how this innovation, what it means in the larger society, because I think 40 to 50% of the U.S. and global population could probably have a biological injury where their nervous system is probably stuck in fight or flight, and it's making them miserable. And they're trying all these things, and they have no idea why. So I really appreciate it, Cheryl, because I just need to hear it. You know, it makes me want to keep going, and I don't always hear it. So I really, really appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Cheryl. We appreciate you, hon.
Yep.
Thank you.
We'll catch up more. We should do a call. Catch up more. Tell me more. I want to hear more about your story.
I would love that very much. Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
I'll get your details from the man.
Okie dokie.
Okay. All right. Talk soon. Bye.
So I felt that it was important that you see from someone who's not, like a military person, someone who wasn't, in one of those situations where they have to do the reviews and all that, someone with an honest, heartfelt statement about what this treatment has done for them. And Cheryl does nothing but rave about how much this has helped her. And I just wanted you to realize that there are so many people out there that are singing your praise, and not trying to give you a big head or anything like that, but just to let you know that you are making an impact, and you literally are saving lives. Cheryl can tell you in more detail about how she was feeling, the thoughts that she was having before she got the treatment. And I felt that it was important that you know this and you hear it directly from the people that it's affecting.
I really appreciate it, because I don't hear it enough. I kind of live in a bubble. I've got a few projects coming out next year, and so I'm like buried in those projects, and I don't really, always hear. You tend to hear the negative stuff. You tend to get the stuff where you hear the criticism. but hey, Miriam sent me a note last night, and that was pretty. That I didn't, it was unexpected. I don't even know if she knew I was coming on, but it was moving. And I asked her, I sent her a message and I said, hey, I'm going on Poe. Can I read this on Poe? Mm-hmm. Can I read it? It'll take me a minute.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So this is from Miriam Francis last night. I've been noticing the relief from the DSR in big ways recently. I would say over the last couple of months, I've noticed increasing big shifts. Improved ability to deal with high stress, and then a big emotional block gone because I've been feeling things, shifting feelings that come and go in moments that they occur, and not just becoming a louder noise or overwhelming panic, but distinct emotions so clearly felt. So I'm able to more easily pay attention and understand why I'm feeling a certain way. The past week or so, a peacefulness settling in to where I've arrived the last couple of days at peace, knowing that whatever happens, I'll be okay.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Art Miriam. Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that when you realize how you affect someone else and how you have changed their life, the impact of that sometimes, and I can tell you from the standpoint of, from law enforcement and seeing the effects of positive things that I've done for other people, I know sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, and I'm one of those people. I don't really like praise. I don't like people giving me attaboys, things like that. And but it is nice to know that when you're working on something like this and you believe in something, that it's actually working and that people are appreciating it, especially in this day and age when so many people just focus on negative.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it. I spent the first 20 years of my life, first half of my life, maybe even a little bit longer, being told I was bad and a POS, and had bad whatever that mechanism is, and it's funny. When you were talking about the DSR, I was a little bit kind of apprehensive, kind of like, okay, we're talking about this medical thing and this science thing, and it's not really about the DSR, right? It's, and I sent you a message. I said, hey, let's talk about the DSR, but maybe we should talk about it in a context as to why we're talking about the DSR. I mean, I feel for myself that I'd love to know what Chad thinks about this, actually. I feel for myself that one of the reasons maybe I recognize the importance of what this thing was in the kind of broader society away from, the extremes, is because I'd lived such an extreme. So I kind of understood it. Like, if something, I hate that expression, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, because it just sounds like a justification for hurting yourself or hurting people. But there's truth in it. And I feel like if you survive, You know, it's taken me a long time to even think of myself as somebody that was victimized or survived, because we get programmed not to be able to be willing to look at that. But I wonder if we survive something extreme or something extremely painful, if we survive, and survive means we keep our wits, does that give us an increased empathy or ability to kind of, you know, I don't know. What do you think, Chad?
Oh, I mean, I agree. I think it's great that the treatment has helped so many people. I'm all for that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, what are we going to talk about? I thought maybe we could talk about, I sent you a couple of things that, I don't know, kind of led us to here, led us to the moment.
Absolutely.
but I'm in your hands, John. I'll do whatever you want.
All right. Well, we've already got a bunch of questions popping up. We'll hit some of those, then we'll talk some more. I've got the points that we went over in our messaging, but some of these folks, you could tell, have been waiting for a while. And Indigo Twin wants to know how you first heard about this. I know you've told us about this before, but there are some folks that are coming into it who, you know, for them it's a new topic.
I actually think it's a fantastic question. I don't know that I've ever answered it like in a very direct way. The answer is in not long before the summer before COVID, or maybe 6 years ago. There were some events in my life that finally, for the first time, led me to get some therapy. And I met a person who was formerly grew up in it from like the 80s. And she owns a mental health clinic. She'd been away from it since she was a kid. And she'd asked me if I ever had any therapy or treatment. And I said, I don't know. I've tried, but I don't think I could do it. And she said, why? And I said, because I feel like a zoo animal. Like, I guess I feel like it's so exotic. You're like they turn you into an alien because your story becomes more interesting than helping you. And then she said, I have this clinic, and if you want to come there, I will, make sure everything isn't like that. So I did it. And 6 weeks in, this woman, very nice woman, diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress. And I laughed in her face. I thought she was crazy. And the look on her face, and I talk about this in the book, was so shocking to me that the kind of walls came down. And so I kind of was like, oh my God, I just saw it. I just was lying, like living the tears of a clown, or just not being honest with myself about how damaged I was in that moment. She kind of got that to collapse. And so then here I was, okay. I have post-traumatic stress. I have complex post-traumatic stress, which is even worse because like post-traumatic stress you get from like singular events. Right. When you have trauma over 20 years and the kind of particular bludgeoning that I had from birth, there's no thing to go to look at. It's just a million things or 1,000 things spread out in increments over decades, right? So that was very daunting for me, and I didn't want to be crazy. And I had a doctor that I worked with that did work with the military through colleagues, and she had quit TAPS and was starting to work with an organization. She was telling me that they're now looking at this as a biological injury, and she had become the chief psychologist at the Stella Center. And I started looking into it. And this idea that I had a biological injury, not some sort of ambiguous, amorphous disorder, was incredibly grounding. So I did, and then the stigma goes away because you're not crazy. You just have an injury. It's a broken leg you can't see. Right. So I did something that was really out of character for me, which is in the middle of COVID, I got on a plane to Chicago and did this experimental Vanilla Sky-like treatment on myself. And that was a really strange thing to do because growing up the way I did, we didn't go to the doctor unless there was a catastrophic event, right? So it's like I'm not comfortable kind of going to, that's something as an adult I've had to really force myself to do. Okay, dentists, doctors, this is something you do it in advance, so it's not something, so it was just very out of character for me to do it, but I did it. And the doctor asked me out to dinner. We went out to dinner. He laid all the science down for me over a 3-hour Mexican meal. I talk about it in the book. And I didn't see Navy SEALs. I didn't see 9/11 responders. I saw the Mexican neighborhoods where I grew up in LA. I saw I saw the kids I grew up with. And I thought they would never, ever go get this, because if you see this on Rogan or 60 Minutes or CBS This Morning or the Doctor Show, it's been, or Wire, like Wall Street Journal, it's been everywhere, you know. It's always a Navy SEAL. It's always a 9/11 first responder. And I thought somebody needs to bring this to the living room. And that was how it happened.
You're going to see that, like the Navy SEALs or the 9/11 responders, they're the ones who always get the biggest flash for it. I can understand that. I got to say, I disagree when you say this was out of character for you. You were basically raised to be a robot and a slave for this cult. You broke away from that. They gave you a piss poor education that was worth nothing. You broke the bonds of that.
Well, they didn't give me I had a kindergarten writing level until I was 19. So
Yeah.
they gave me zero education. I mean, not even piss poor. Piss poor is a compliment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but you see where I'm going there. You continually break away from what this cult has done and the way that they've tried to control you. And you've broken it more than once by first breaking away from it, by educating yourself, all the different things that you've done. I think that this is more in line with a character that I see than being out of character for you. You're the kind of person that is willing to take the risk if you think that it's going to improve your life or better who you are. And I think that this is just a perfect example of who you are. I think that you are much more strong than you believe or present, and you are able to overcome immense adversity. So I'm very glad that you stepped out of your comfort zone and had this treatment, because if you look at what has happened, you have people like Ree here. The gift of this treatment, other than the total physical relief I feel, is the 100% removal of shame. The shame removal is my greatest unexpected gift.
That's powerful. That's emotional. That makes me emotional. You know, I mean, I feel like that's been, that's been my best friend, my little buddy, my invisible friend for most of my life. And I would say that I didn't even know it was there before I went and, got the DSR for myself. So it wasn't until I did the DSR that I even realized I've been living with that as my best friend my whole life. Not just the shame, but, and I don't want to, again, I don't want to turn it all into a big bummer, but, the embarrassment of the defilements that were done to me. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to be associated with something that, is like The Love Boat meets science fiction, meets, I really, really love art, and I try to make art. And I've always been worried, that if this story came out or people knew this about me, then whenever they looked at my work, they would see this first, then my work. And this is the conundrum. And I'm feeling that right now. Right. It was, and I got to give Aaron credit for this. When he and I were talking, he said, would you ever do an interview? I said, never, and he said, why? And I said, because this is how people will see me. And then Aaron said, no, they're just going to see you as more interesting. And I couldn't see that. I think, more and more I'm right. But I'm cautious because I want to make sure that, that my work that I love so much, making beautiful things, is not seen through a filter of this really strange situation. And it's not just the man, John, what are you doing to me? It's not
I'm supposed to be doing this.
It's not just the movement, you know, and that not being my choice, right? It's you know, so being so young and having it be a gauntlet for so long, and you know, you feel it in your bones to the point where you just, you know, they take your childhood and if I'm defined by this as an adult by doing conversations like this, then do they get my adulthood? What do they want? They get my whole life?
Right.
Like my whole life has to be about this thing?
Well,
you know?
And that's the sad point of it is that sometimes it's like with me, no matter what I do, people either look at me as John Poe the cop or Chief Poe. That's how most people look at me. And unfortunately, that's the reality of this world we live in, where even though it may not be who we are, it's what society defines us as. But I think one of the big things that I take from this is that you are moving up and beyond it. Yes, and no one denies that you had this horrible upbringing, that you were denied not only a childhood, but your teenage years. But I think that at this point, you are moving far beyond that. And this is just opening more doors to you, to an adult life that a lot of people just wouldn't have. A lot of people are afraid of making the steps that you're making. And I don't think it's robbing anything from you. I think if anything, I think you're going to find that it is going to open so many opportunities that you wouldn't have had otherwise. You could still be stuck in there in the org.
Well, you know, I've got people that I love dearly that are, right. Yeah. And then, so that has its own thing, its own quandary, but hey, I have other things. I wrote this book that I'm very proud of called The Iconist.
Absolutely.
And that's on American Airlines right now. So if you're flying American, it's in the in-flight entertainment and it's up there. It's in there with like Philip K. Dick and Jane Austen. So that I consider that book being on American Airlines one of the things I'm most proud of. It was incredible. I think my agent told me a year ago, and I didn't quite believe her. And then I just didn't even know what to think. And I was busy, and I was like, she said it was there. And then I was on a flight to Brazil last year, and you know, I pulled it up, and I was on American Airlines, and I pulled up the podcasts on the panel, and then there it was next to all these kind of almost, you know, classics. And I got to tell you, it was like a bigger deal almost than college. It was a cool thing. So I'm very proud of The Iconist. There's another book called A Kid's Book About Resilience that I'm really proud of, that are, you know, if you want to know how I did it, that's the book that I say how I did it in my mind. Like, that's the mindset that I had.
Yeah, I didn't know the children's one. What's the name of the children's book?
It's called A Kid's Book About Resilience. It's out on Amazon now. It had a soft launch this year. Next year it comes out on Doring Kindersley, which is the largest children's publisher in the world for nonfiction, and they're owned by Penguin Random House. So next year that book will be in bookstores, and it will be translated in different languages, and it'll be, you know, all around. Yeah.
And there you go, folks. That's the link to it. That's the Amazon page, and I just put the link in there. I've been scrolling back and forth between the Iconist and the Invisible Machine there for you on the bottom of the screen. So those are up there, and then I know my mods are putting those out there as well. Bobby Joe Kellogg wants to know, how does one qualify for the treatment?
I think the qualifications are pretty liberal, because you have to understand that the people that are going to get this treatment, the one thing they all have in common is they've been traumatized in very severe ways. And people that are traumatized, there was a book that came out a few years ago by Nadine Burke Harris. I've talked about it before, who's a physician in Oakland, called The Deepest Well. And she has an incredible amount of data in that book where she's able to prove or make show through data that the leading cause of disease in adult humans is childhood trauma.
Wow.
Yeah. And we explain a lot of that mechanism in The Invisible Machine. Like, if the body keeps the score, as Bessel van der Kolk says, then the sympathetic nervous system is the scorekeeper. So one of the things we wanted to do in The Invisible Machine was explain how mental trauma as a child and older, what actually goes on physiological in the body to where that leads to an autoimmune disease or an orthopedic problem or cancer, right? So we tried to draw that line. We try to explain what's actually physiologically going on. I mean, it's incredible when you think about how the mind works. Like, if I see someone get shot in front of me, okay, no one touched me, okay, but I'm going to be this different biologically for the rest of my life. I've now been biologically hammered, biologically changed. I now have excess nerve growth factor in my brain, more norepinephrine in my brain, and no one touched me. And I have a physical injury to my body. That's incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's some folks that there were some people that came up that had some questions about, how can this work? How can the mind actually affect the body? And I go to one of the simplest examples of it is the mother who weighs 100 pounds, is 5 foot tall, but is able to lift a car off of a child. And that's simply because the mind told her body, you can do this. So you have a situation like that, that's a very high stress, very traumatic kind of situation. Then how can it not have a negative effect on you going through something like that? So that's how I explain it to folks when they say, well, I just don't believe that this could be a physical thing, that how can a traumatic experience affect you physically? There's just a real good example right there. And it happens how many times a year where you hear about a mother who literally can't lift a bag of groceries, suddenly lifts a truck off of a child. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like most people, when you explain the science to them, quickly come around to the fact that it's physical. I think that it kind of almost settles their mind. It's interesting, leading up to this talk today, John, I got a call, an angry call yesterday, not because of you, but a friend of mine, but not somebody I hang out with or talk to or see very often. A friend of mine from 10 years ago called me up, very angry, and she had gone to a wedding yesterday, and her mother had come from the desert compound to the wedding. It was a family wedding. So it was the first time she'd seen her mother in years and years. Wow. And her mother told the other members of the family that she wouldn't be talking to her daughter because she was friends with someone that was against her group. And so this person assumed that was our friendship at some point, even though this is not, someone that's very close to me in my life, or that I even would consider, a close friend. I mean, this person has distance, and she was, it's just incredible to me. It's like that this person was told, came from the compound. They're part of the inner Navy, the private Navy, and at this wedding yesterday, they couldn't told not to talk to their daughter, or decided they weren't going to talk to their daughter because they were friends with me from 10 years ago.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
But that's a choice that mother made. How could that be your fault?
It's not my fault. I don't take it on as my fault, but it's right. But it's just what this is, And right now there's probably some dudes watching us that work for them, that watch all this content.
Oh,
And they're
sure.
looking at me, and they're looking at you, and they're looking at Chad and his flowered shirt, and they're just thinking, what a bunch of scumbag, suppressives that don't want to help mankind. I mean, that's it doesn't matter what we say. There's no room for them to hear. Like, it doesn't matter to them that I was separated from my parents at birth and grew up in this thing with these nannies. It's interesting, for a group that documents everything, probably the one thing they didn't document is what is the taking care of the kids. There's not a lot of documentation, right? It's kind of like that was over there. We were penned until we grew for labor. And, most of the time, if you see a bunch of angry people in their 40s that said, this happened to me as a kid and I'm really pissed off, and there's a few hundred of them, the natural inclination would be, well, what are they angry about? But that's not what happens here. Right.
Well, when you look at, I did a live recently where we discussed the Mace Kingsley Family Center, I believe it's called, in Clearwater, Florida, and their prior, whatever they were when they were the ranch out in California, and then they had been in at least 3 states, as far as I understand.
I went there.
Oh, okay.
I went to the one in Los Angeles. Yeah.
So then you know very well about it.
Yeah.
But on their current website, and they may have changed it, but at the time we did the live, and this was just a couple of weeks ago, they literally quoted L. Ron Hubbard talking about how even a one day old should be audited. And I think that truly shows the heart of Scientology. Whereas in his statements, he talks about, you're not a child, you're an old being in a young body. And so that's their get out of jail on that, as to why they don't talk about the atrocities done to children and things like that. You know it full well. You lived it. And, it's amazing to me. Per Scientology Audit, and we've got a lot of folks from Australia, absolutely love it. And I know we were wanting to talk about this point as well. And she says, hi, Jamie, thanks for coming on. Just wondering if you still offer the discount. I'm saving up to get it done, and I live in Australia. P.S. You're amazing. So I know that one of the things we had talked about was you were working with some different doctors as well, and the possibility of price discounts, or that the price is coming down. So
yeah,
can we get to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I work with Special Forces, and they can't be a charity that funds Special Forces guys getting this. I work very closely with them. Okay. They can't be seen to giving all their money to one center.
Right.
So they've been forced to vet a lot of other providers. And so in my work with them, I found another providers. I have a provider in Tampa that's, less expensive than Stella. I'm working directly with a clinic. Shout out to Nora Ames. Nora Ames told me about a clinic here. I called them up. They knew who I was. They had my book in their lobby. I went over, I met with them. I've been meeting with them for the last 2 months regularly. And that's 2/3 the price. It's 35% less than Stella. And that doctor is one of the most innovative doctors in the world doing it. So I've developed and continue to develop a very strong relationship with them. So I want people to come to the Northwest. I want people to come to Portland. They can, and I'm working very, very directly with this clinic in terms of, there's possibilities for payment plans, which we haven't done yet, but it's possible. And the price is a lot less. And and I have some other places around the world. They're just not the top of mind right now that have all been vetted by my friends at the Special Forces.
Absolutely.
So we know that they're delivering the DSR, SGB, the dual sympathetic reset at the highest level of quality and standard. And they vet based on outcome.
There we go.
Yeah.
And we got someone here who is very proud to announce how strong you are. So Daniel Mustard's in the audience tonight. So just thought I'd throw that in there.
my brother, the genius. I love him with all my heart, and I got to say, you know, I have a lot of brothers and stepbrothers. Mm-hmm. Okay, you know, growing up in this thing, you know, it's like families can be like an astral chart of step. And, yeah, okay. So Daniel, you know, despite everything that's happened to him, and despite how he's lived and everything he's been through, when we sit down and talk, and talk about what happened, or, you know, just our lives, you know, there's probably no better person for me in my life to talk to that has as much as has such a keen, intelligent, rational, and loving understanding of, you know, he's so smart of what happened. Right. So, you know, a shout out to Daniel Mustard. If you don't know who he is, go onto YouTube, type in homeless mustard creep, and watch the video that has 30 to 40 million views.
Wow.
You'll never be the same. Go on YouTube, type in homeless mustard creep. They'll see a ton of videos. Click on the one that has 30 to 40 million views, and you'll know why. One reason why Daniel Mustard is so effing smart and so effing special as a human being.
Oh yeah, I think that he's. I love listening to his music. I just wish that he was the one who was getting all those views instead of someone else. But, you know, it's and I've been wanting to talk to him. I'd love to pick his brain and see who Daniel Mustard is.
I'll call him when we get off, and I'll tell him, you guys got to do a show. You got to be a great show. Right.
I'd love to have him on. Yeah. We've talked once or twice on Facebook, but I don't know how often he gets on there. So,
but back to the auditing thing. I just want to say the auditing. I call it machine-based counseling. Okay, yeah. But you know, back to that and the one-day-old thing. Okay, my view on what that is you cannot. You know, you've got this machine. It's a galvanometer. It registers these biological things. We're taught to believe that it's registering thought, that there's a current that goes through our body. And when you have a thought, it resists that current. And then which means that you should investigate that thought further. Okay. And that's how we end up kind of going to our past lives and things like that. Right. That's at least the idea. When I look back, and this is something I've been spending a lot of time the last few months thinking about, conversations with Miriam and others, it really is a couple things. One is you cannot leave one of these sittings with the machine without the needle kind of doing this floating motion, which means you're happy, right? So you have all sorts of moments when you're doing this, when you don't want to be there. Right? They start off asking you about your problems, if you've done anything bad in the world, and if you have an upset with somebody. Okay. And so you're starting off not wanting to, you know, feeling like you want to leave a lot of the time. Okay. But you're not allowed to leave ever until the thing floats, which means you're happy. Right. Yeah. So they're training you from the first time you ever do this to not listen to your body. And the thing that the thing that we're finally talking about, and you know, I don't really know Serge. We have a lot of mutual friends. I can't imagine that I never met him at some point during our time. You know, he seems to be the one that seems to be beating this drum the most about the children and the kids, and so I'm very appreciative of that. And I feel that that's the thing that blows my mind the most is in any culture, right? Or any society, the thing that we value most, like if there's any sort of character that we should have, it's typically, no matter what our culture or where we live, is the protection of the most vulnerable children. I mean, we're biologically hardwired to be more defensive of children
Absolutely.
than any other group of people in society. Because if we don't defend the defenseless kids or the kids that are vulnerable when they're young, then we don't have a society or a species. Okay. So one of the things that's shocking to me about this whole thing is, with all the documentaries that come out, I've never seen a documentary on what happened to the kids.
Right.
And I can't understand why that wasn't the first documentary. I still feel, and this is where, I don't always agree, necessarily agree with Serge's presentation. Okay. But I think he tells the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, even, I wouldn't necessarily agree with all of his characterizations, but in terms of like, never let, in terms of an overarching concept of the truth. Okay. This story of what happened to the kids to this day continues to be whitewashed. And it's not being whitewashed just by the movement. I feel that the people that are whitewashing this thing even more than the movement are the ex-members from the 60s and 70s that built this thing. They don't talk about what happened to the kids. They'll do tons of interviews. They'll never talk about what happened to the kids, or if they do, it's like, oh yeah, that was horrible. Yeah, we heard about what happened to them. That was bad. And then they're moving on. And there's no emotional connection when they're talking about the destruction and annihilation of children, right? Which is, when you're told, whether you're a kid that was in the inner movement, the inner clergy, the inner sanctum like me, the belly of the beast, or you're a kid that grew up outside of it with a parent that worked, you're still being told from birth that you're a trillion-year-old fallen god. You're still being told that you can't exhibit emotion because you're dramatizing. You're not allowed to experience, quote, human emotion and reaction. I was hearing those words: knock off the bank, your reactionary mind. Stop the human emotion and reaction. Stop dramatizing. Before I even understood what those things were. Okay, I don't know what that does to the developing brain, right? So there's something about even the ex-members, not all of them, but it's probably 98%. Okay, where they have no empathy for what happened to this group of kids. And I almost want to talk about it at a distance, because the fact that I'm included in that group kind of makes me sick. It bothers me a lot, because to me, that's all we should be talking about. And when that's exhausted, when we've talked about the kids for 10 fucking years and we're done, then we can talk about other stuff. But no, that's the one thing they won't talk about. It's the one thing they don't do documentaries about. We've been made invisible.
Right.
And I still think to this day it's like that. And this is the last thing I want to say about it. And then I'll shut up and let respond to whatever you want to ask me. But I just want to say, that I do believe that this counseling, you do these training, this non-reactionary training, where people try to get you to get upset about stuff by screaming crazy stuff at you, and you don't react. Well, when you turn off someone's ability to react to the negative, you also turn off their empathy. When you condition people from birth or older in these counseling sessions to deny their body and continue on, you're basically training a human being to deny the body. So it's very easy when you're doing that all the time, because our body, as in that example I gave earlier of the guy getting his head blown off in front of him and I'm physically changed forever, our body tells us when something's wrong.
Absolutely.
So if you train someone to deny the body, maybe that explains why so many of these, quote, former members, ex-members, people that say that we're just like them and they're just like us. Maybe it explains why they don't get it, right? Maybe their empathy's been turned off or dampened in a way where that they don't see. But it's bizarre. It's the only group of people I've ever seen, these exes, where they're like, yeah, we went through it too. No, you didn't. What we went through, and I don't want to sound like I'm whinging, okay? What these kids went through is something special. And that's why when you see them on YouTube, they're bubbling over, right? Because they're still being gaslit. They're still being told, yeah, that kind of sucked. That wasn't so great. The girl that called me yesterday pissed off for me that I don't even talk to. You know, she spent years and years at a ranch in the desert, never seeing her mother. And whatever happened to that ranch. But this person who chose to do it in the 70s had a shitty life and got out. They're just like me. Fuck you. You're not.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
and that's like, and again, I can't even believe I did that. I normally control myself, but it's like when I watch some of these kids that I grew up with on the internet, and I just see how pissed off they are. And I ask myself, why are they so pissed off? Because they're still being told by the ones that are out, that are supposed to be their allies, that it never happened. Or you have, you know, the Australian Papa Smurf talking about it, and it's like, yeah, it was really horrible what they went through, but there's no connection between what he's saying and what actually happened to these kids, right? If you're going to say something horrible happened to somebody, maybe you could show some form of connection between, you know, what you're saying and what happened.
Well, I'm going to say first off, I'm more than happy to stay on this topic. I don't have a problem with it. Number two, talking about the e-meter. When I showed a schematic of it to a friend of mine that's an electrical engineer,
and I just want to apologize. Like, let me just apologize for that.
Don't
I do
apologize.
not. Okay. I mean, I don't ever. I'm pretty controlled. I don't have outbursts like that. I shouldn't have done that. I apologize to everyone watching. I had, when in that moment, I just want to tell you what was going on in that moment. Okay. I just want to say what was going on in that moment. And then just so people understand why something happened. Okay. So there was a kid in the red brick building. I'm not going to say his name. He was molested when we were in that red brick building. That was maybe the only defilement that I didn't go through. And then when I came back from college, I saw him at Celebrity Center when I was 26, 27. And there was something different about him. You know, I didn't know what it was. And he ended up taking his own life. He had a wife and kids. And he had been molested in that building. And he, after that, he had wanted to molest. And in his note, he said, the only honorable thing for me to do is to take my own life because I have this urge and I wouldn't, and I don't want to do anything to hurt anybody or shame my wife and kids. So I'm taking the honorable way out. I believe that if that had not been done to him, he would have never had that urge. I'm not a psychologist, but that's what I believe. And I also believe that if the importance was put on what happened to us, why are these kids so angry? Why are we so angry? That maybe we would chillax a little bit if we were acknowledged, or if we were given empathy and given understanding that this was a different kind of experiment that was done to these kids that cannot be related to having been part of it in the other way as an adult, having some form of choice when you're recruited. It's very different when you have no power as an infant or no power as a toddler or no power as a grade schooler. Okay. It's a very different thing. And I sometimes think if we would just say, okay, guys, talk, what happened? What did you experience? That maybe guys like him would have had enough relief that it wouldn't continue to happen, and it does continue to happen. And I know their names. And again, I don't want to be melodramatic enough, but that was that he came into my mind, and he was my friend when I was 5, and I'm sorry.
Okay, first off, in this space, there's no need for you to apologize. I know you feel that you need to. everyone here is here for you. They respect you. They love you. This is the safe place for you. You're allowed to be you. You're allowed to feel how you feel. Don't apologize for being you.
Yeah,
I would rather you sit here and tell everybody to F off for an hour and a half and be who you are than hide your true feelings.
Okay.
And I'm one of those that anybody in my audience can tell you, my goal from day one was to stop Scientology, get their religious exemption taken away. It has morphed to my goal is stop anything to do with children because of what Scientology has brought about, what that narcissist liar who spent his entire life creating fantasy did, and built an organization around that not only allows for children to be the victims of SA, it builds a way to cover it up, to hide the person who did it from ever being brought to justice for it, and to then blame the victims of it. That's my goal. After that, my next one is that we deal with the senior citizens who can't take care of themselves or are being abused. From that point, it's shutting down Scientology. But my number one goal, and it's been for some time now, is that the children are our priority. And however we can fight Scientology to bring this down and make this stop, that's my goal.
Yeah, I just don't want to get angry. And I feel like if I'm angry, I just don't want to be in emotional outbursts. I completely agree with you. Am I, John? Yeah, John, I just completely agree with you.
And so, please never feel like you need to apologize here. That's the thing is that you have, with what you've been through, what you've seen, what you've experienced, there's no need for an apology.
I just feel like somebody could take that outburst out of context.
Yeah,
and,
I can understand that, but if they're going to do it, they're going to edit out the part where you say I have to apologize as well. So, but it is appreciated that you're thinking of others when you say that. So, but I just
John, you maybe just think of this, about 10, 15 years ago on the History Channel. I don't know what I was watching, A&E, one of those things. There was a documentary, and it was a documentary of this Catholic priest who was high up, like a bishop. I think he'd come from the Vatican, and he was traveling around the world and going to all these remote outposts, these remote Catholic outposts, like an Inuit, population in Alaska. And he was going to these remote outposts and apologizing for the molestations, where they knew that there was a priest where it had been a problem. And it was really powerful because they would show up and the guy would start, he'd be in like a hut in an Inuit village in freezing storm, and he would design in all his robes. And then there would be this, now a 65, 70-year-old man in front of them, where this had happened to them when they were a kid. And the priest would begin to apologize on behalf of the Catholic Church. The guy's 70 years old, 65 years old. And just hearing that apology, these guys would turn to putty. They would just break down. It was like they were 5 again, and they would just be wailing and crying. And it really, was powerful. It's like, I would just like to see the kids I grew up with get an apology so that they could get that relief. I just would like other people out, like you guys, what you guys have done for us is quote is the never ends by seeing it. It's so powerful for us because, people within our own group that went through this with us will not truly admit what it was. They'll admit that it happened, but they weren't there. And one of the things that sucks, the few things that really sucks about human beings is unless we see something with our own eyes and we experience it, most of us can't really imagine or empathize with it. And that sucks.
And that's, one of the sad things you see is up until the advent of the internet and social media, for a long time, things like this were just the dirty little secrets no one would discuss. And that's one of the things I'm grateful for with social media, the advent of the internet, is the fact that this is becoming the reality of it, and the truth of it is finally getting out there. I still think in many ways, like with the Catholic Church, they're still allowing the abusers to get away with things and not have to be held accountable for it. Moving someone to a different church across the world, I don't think it's any kind of punishment. All it's doing is hiding them from being able to be held accountable for what they've done. And that's what I see with Scientology. And it has to be broken at some point. We have to break this wall down, and these people need to be held accountable. I'm sorry, but if you hurt a child, that's the limits are off for me.
Yeah. I have a question. I have a question for you. You know, there's a lot of these people that come out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were involved in things that harmed us. Maybe their job was to deal with the government so that they wouldn't come into the quarters and see how we lived.
Right.
Right. And then they leave, and maybe they speak out. Maybe they become a whistleblower. Maybe they become a hero. Maybe they just become a person that's respected for speaking out. Okay.
Or maybe they
but I'm not trying to pick on, any particular person.
Mm-hmm.
But they see the things that they did as just some things that they did because they were on the inside. And now that they're out, well, that was just some mob shit. That was just some stuff I did when I was inside, the machine, right? Now I'm me again, right? And so my question for you as a police chief and a law enforcement officer is, what's the truth of that? Like is that a person a criminal, or were they just under the influence?
They're bullshitting you, and they are trying to cover for what they did by saying that it's mob mentality or they were following orders under the directive of a cult. The fact is, they did what they did, whether they want to admit it or not, whether they want to blame it on someone else or something else, they did what they did. And if the proof and the facts are there, the probable cause, that's all I need to go forward with the report and the attempts to go ahead and prosecute. And I, quite honestly, that's why there are certain people in this community that are former people that were at the top levels. I have no interest in having any communication with, no interest in dealing with these people. I think that they need to be fronted for what they've done. They need to be proved for what they've done. They need to be outed for what they've done, and they need to face justice for what they've done. And people say I'm an a-hole for saying these things, but that's what I believe. I have spent more than the majority of my life standing up for those who can't stand for themselves. I've been stabbed. I've been beaten within an inch of my life protecting other people. If you think that at this point in my life, I'm not going to continue to be that way, they're out of their friggin' minds. But the fact is that I think that, in my personal opinion, what they did, they need to be held accountable for. I don't care what excuse they've got for it.
It's funny, I promised myself before we did this today, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go on there. I need to and have a non-intense conversation with Poe.
You knew that wasn't going to happen.
I did. I know. I thought it was. And just have fun and BS and just answer questions. But I'm tired. I've been working really hard on some projects lately. And I'm tired right now just from working. And so here I am. It's
we aren't getting any younger at any point during this. I'm sitting here with a torn cartilage in my left elbow that's going to have to get operated on. And I'm every one of these lives that I do, I get off. I can't even use my arm for an hour or so. but these are important. They need to be out there. People need to hear this. People need to understand it. They need to hold people accountable.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
This whole thing of giving people a pass because of the fact that, well, the great things that they've done since they've been out, it does not wash away the sins. Admit what you've done. Quit trying to blame it on David Miscavige. Quit trying to blame it on Lafayette Ronald Hubbard. Admit to the things you've done, accept them, own up to them, and take the punishment you get for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. My main thing is, shout out to Serge, who will not stop beating this drum, and I'm so appreciative to him because, we're so programmed from birth, to the worst thing we can be is a victim, right? You've heard, I'm sure a lot of people watching this know that we get taught that being a victim is worse than being, it's like being worse than a pedophile or something. I mean, it's like the worst thing you can be. Like, oh my God, that guy's a victim. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I can't imagine a dirtier word to call somebody. It would be more it would be more comparable to calling someone the N-word within the confines of that movement, to call them call somebody a victim, right? They're degraded beyond belief, right? We're also taught, we grow up in this thing, we have no choices. We're signing these, so a lot of us signed these billion-year things when we were 5 years old, when we were believing in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, okay? And then we get older, we don't get educated, we get into this thing, then we leave, and then they saddle us with this massive debt, upwards of $100,000 more. And then we're told anybody, I know Aaron's talked a lot about this. Anybody that leaves is, he wrote down, Lafayette wrote down, anybody that leaves is a degraded being. So not only you're put through this blender, then you leave to save your own life, and then you're stigmatized as being a degraded degreg of humanity for the rest of your life. Right. So even these people that leave, that say that are on their side, when we express any sort of frustration that comes out in a dramatic way, that programming is hard to turn off. It's hard to switch.
Absolutely.
And so they continue even after they leave, and they're supposed to be our allies. And I'm not talking about any particular person. I feel like this is 98% of the people, not all of them. I have gotten some people that have empathized with me that were part of that 70s crew, 60 that was recruited, that built it. But I think the question we should be asking, is, we were roaming around these bases. We're roaming around the streets of LA. We're not in school, right? Nobody batted an eye. I think maybe the question we should be asking is, what was going on with these guys that they didn't bat an eye? Because I think most of the time, if you were on a campus somewhere, and anywhere else, another kind of movement institution, and there was a 5-year-old walking around by themselves, you'd be like, where's the parent? So what's turned off, and how does it get turned off? That these guys are like, no, I'm just going to go and lap up, I'm going to go suck down some counseling and lap up some, Lafayette doctrine, and, it's even that yesterday when I got that call from that person who was mad at me, I thought, wow, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm supposed to have all that happen to me and then just be cool, eat it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I've learned in my life now, through it coming into my life various times, that until you can understand and master your own story, you can't master who you are. And so when they tell us we can't talk about it because it reflects badly on them, they don't just take our challenges in our lives, they take our whole life, because we don't own our story, they do.
Well, I think there's some great examples of, just how, what I feel is, some people are afraid of the truths coming out about them, that they actually get other people to start attacking those who have the secrets as well. So one of the sad things that I see nowadays is that word, the PEDO word, that so many people will use it just to harm other people, that it's actually taking some of the stigma away from it and taking some of the true power of it away from it. And it's sad that this is the kind of society that we're in, but we really need to point out those who are the true culprits, the true monsters that harm children. And it doesn't always have to be in the fact of an essay of a child. It's the working a child 20 hours a day. It's the treating children like they're adults and making them lose that childhood innocence. It's the making them sit down and audit adults and hear the inappropriate content that is being told to them, and making them think, you can do this, you don't react to this. The bull baiting, the touch, all the different traumas they do to these children, all these things, I think.
Or just like say you're a public kid and your parents are just busy all the time going and climbing the ladder to not having a body again, right? You're telling that kid from birth that this other thing is way more important than them. And that's not really what we do as children. How we procreate and make the race go forward is we make kids feel loved and important. And I just think even just the deprivation of being always told you're fifth on the list from a young age could destroy a child mind,
Absolutely. I sent you an email and a phone number. Okay. A very good friend of mine, Fat Grammy Mona, is doing some amazing things in the way that she's going at Scientology and way to try to bring them down. I sent it to you on Facebook there. But you might want to talk to her also, because some of the things that she's actually has in the works and has started, you might be quite amazed by it. We can't put it out here because a lot of it, as well as I do, the minute the Scientology finds out what the plan is, they're going to find ways to try and stop it. But I just wanted to make sure that you knew that I got that to you. But this, it's absolutely amazing to me how people are so willing to overlook things like that, and how they are. I mean, it's getting almost to the point where you have some folks that are like, yep, it happened. Let's get on with it. No, until you confront the traumas and acknowledge them, they're going to continue to be a leech on you. They're going to continue to be a stain on you. And that's literally, I know that from talking to people who have been childhood victims, that they feel constantly as though they're dirty and not deserving because of what a monster did to them. And we can't just overlook it and move on. We've got to continue to put this out there, to tell people. Hopefully someday the media is actually going to go, hey, we've got to say something about this. We've got to look into it. But until that point comes, we've got to continue to hold that torch, and we've got to keep throwing it into the face of the public so that they see what is going on with this cult and how that they are treating children, and how that they are not only destroying childhood, they are letting monsters not only go unpunished, but be free to do what they want to do. And blame the children for it.
I mean, I don't know. I'm right now. It's funny when you say the dirty thing. I mean, I feel like right now, I don't know. It's all such a, I feel like I don't want it to always be a bummer. It isn't, right. There are incredible stories of resilience. And I want to say that there were some amazing human beings, adult human beings around back then that went to extraordinary means to help us. There was a guy that started a Boy Scout troop to get us out of the city. And he helped hundreds of us over the years. He was in the Inner Navy. For all I know, he still is.
Wow.
And he saw what was happening to us and he intervened in this very, very dramatic way. It was amazing. And this guy, I'm sure, saved my life. I'll be grateful. I'm pretty sure he's still part of it, but I'll be grateful to him for the rest of my life. So I do also want to say there were so many amazing people that when things were on the brink, they stepped in and they did something that made the difference. And that's a huge part of the story. And, it's not all bad. Yeah. I'm tired. And I thought I'm really well rested for this thing, but I did not expect to, yeah.
But you look at, let's start going back to more positive stuff. You start looking at the feral Cheryls and you look at the Miriams. And I got to tell you, when Miriam was on here last week, she was literally glowing and couldn't stop smiling through most of that time that she was on here. And, that has to really give you some hope, give you that light at the end of the tunnel that it's got to give you some good feeling. And
it does. Absolutely. It does. I watched it. I thought it was beautiful. And, my dream for this thing is that it's in 10 years, it's like LASIK.
Yeah.
Everybody's going and getting their trauma reset. What does that mean, Danny? That means continue. Am I supposed to continue? All right. I'll call you. Yeah.
Let me give you a good story about that. From the age of 5, I wore glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in my 30s, and my glasses, if I didn't get the prescriptions that made the lens thinner, my glasses weighed so much, they literally made marks on my nose that lasted for months. I won a free LASIK because we literally had someone that we had to fight for over 45 minutes before we could get him under control. It was myself and another officer. And this is before we had tasers or anything like that. But during the fight, he got my glasses and smashed them. And I remember I sat down in that chair. Well, first off, I was about to lose my mind because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to cut on and then they're going to burn my eyes. And they gave me a Valium. And about a half hour later, the wife looked at me and she goes, "How you feeling now?" And I said, "Eff it, let's do this." And I go in, I sit down, and I just remember, everything went absolutely fog because they open up the eyes there so they can get the laser in to do it. They did the laser treatment. It took less than 5 minutes to do it. They brought the lens back down on my eyes, and then they told me to open my eyes, and I looked, and for the first time in my life, without glasses on my face, I could see everything so clearly. And I literally just tears, because I had spent my whole life that if I didn't have my glasses on, I literally couldn't see something 3 feet in front of me. So I understand how a lot of these folks are feeling when they come through with the DSR.
It's a really good analogy, John. It's a really good analogy. One that I hear a lot that I think is kind of similar to that. And again, I'm going to push my book shamelessly because I think it's really necessary. It's really good to read it because you can understand the science and not just be taking, somebody's word for it. Right. But what's so good, one of the things that's such a great analogy. It really is, like seeing clearly for the first time. And another one I hear a lot that's kind of interesting. I'd be wondering what you think about this as a, career long law enforcement officer dealing with stressful situations for 30 years. Mm-hmm. Is that a lot of people will say like that they were, after their post-traumatic stress, they're basically living where kind of a horror show is playing in the background all the time. There's always no matter what they're doing, there's a movie playing them this thing. And when they do the DSR, the movie turns off.
Well, to give you an idea with me, and without even getting the DSR, when you and I sat there and we were talking, and we had talked for 15, 20 minutes, and you started laying out every symptom that I had that would compare to PTSI, and it felt like a weight lifted off me, because for the longest time I couldn't understand why I constantly craved chaos. Why, if everything wasn't in shambles and I had to go in and fight for someone, why I always felt like I wasn't accomplishing anything. After you telling me that, just hearing someone actually understand and see the symptoms that were affecting me, it was like this huge weight being lifted off my shoulders. And when I talked to Miriam about it, and we were talking about how I felt with this, and she said, yes, that's exactly how I felt. And I understand that's what they're feeling. They are feeling like this weight, and it could be so many different symptoms, but it's been holding them down. It's been making them slow. It's been making them compromised in their ability to live life. And now that's gone. And now they're able to live a more complete and fulfilling life. That's my analogy of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's deep. I mean, that's profound. I mean, how do I respond? I mean, I think part of the way I want to respond to that is say this. I don't know how many of the people watching kind of know the backstory to what we're talking about, but basically what we're talking about is the idea, the science is in. We now know that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is not a D. It's a biological injury to the body, and you can see it on a brain scan. The reason we call it the invisible machine is kind of a misnomer in a way. We're basically saying there's a mechanism that gets tripped that you don't see. If you see somebody with a broken leg, you'll go out of your way to make sure they're cool. But when somebody has a broken or a sympathetic nervous system, physiologically, biologically stuck in fight or flight, we don't know to treat them a certain way, right? And then we go even further based on what you just said. And not only do we not treat them a certain way with grace, but we say we tell them they have a disorder. We tell them they're crazy. Right. Imagine if you had a broken leg and then someone told you were crazy. That's going to make having a broken leg maybe even a little more stressful and worse, right? So even if someone doesn't get the DSR, if they read the book or they see other interviews that I've done where I've just talked about this, or we can do another interview just on that. Mm-hmm. If you could come to the conclusion that hypervigilance, extreme anxiety, sense of doom, hyperarousal, lack of sleep, aggressive ideation, fight, suicidal ideation, unalive yourself ideation, flight, the ultimate form of flight. When you could start to understand, I don't even believe depression, and this is an opinion, is a symptom. I think it's what you feel when you're carrying all these other symptoms 24 hours a day because your nervous system is stuck in fight or flight. When you can just understand, even if you didn't get the treatment, when you can just understand in your heart that it's physical, the relief that creates, because we've taken the stigma away. Right. And then even then, if you're having a feeling, to know that it's your body and not this amorphous thing in your mind, which you can't really touch, or it's just out there. Just that alone is so powerful, John. That's what I think you're saying. And I think it's really profound. I mean, when we sat down to write the book, the editor said to me, what are we trying to accomplish here? What do you want at the end of this book? Do you want people to get the treatment? I said, no. My goal for the end of this book is that anyone that reads it knows that they have a biological condition. If I can prove that through data and argument, then that changes the world. Just knowing that you're not crazy, that changes the world.
And going back to the statement you said when we first started, when you were talking about that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. At this point in my life, it's done nothing. All it's done is just made my body just tore to pieces. So, the whole, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I think that talk to anyone over 55 years of age and ask them how that feels.
orthopedics, eyesight, autoimmune, all of these things are a direct result of an stimulated, overactive sympathetic nervous system, which now can be reversed by the dual sympathetic reset over 1 to 2 days with a simple outpatient procedure, and 15, 20 minutes a day. And, when you understand the science of it, it's really simple. They just, your brain, when you experience low levels of trauma over a long period of time, which is complex, or even, or just trauma over a long period of time, complex post-traumatic stress or prolonged allostatic load or toxic stress, or if you have an extreme traumatic event, your brain and your floods and your nervous system flood with nerve growth factor, causing extra nerves to sprout in your amygdala, and an increase in norepinephrine. People with post-traumatic stress have, I think, and again, I'm not a scientist, but I've studied this stuff, I think 24% more norepinephrine in the brain. And all the DSR does is it goes into the neck where there's extra NGF, and it, using a local anesthetic like Novocaine that wears off very quickly. I think it's bupivacaine or Nopivac. It's like what they use in an epidural, but bupivacaine is one, but the other one's Nopivacaine. I'm going to say it wrong, but it's like bupivacaine, and it just shuts down the nervous system for 5 minutes. Wow. And then and they use the same stuff for an epidural because it's so short lasting. Then when it turns back on 10 minutes later, the feedback loop gets interrupted. The norepinephrine recedes, that's associated with anxiety, and the nerve growth factor goes back to normal. Now, so the nerve growth factor goes back to normal in the nervous system and in the amygdala. That causes those extra nerves in the amygdala to retreat and go back to normal. So before PTSD, say you have 4 nerves and then you have a traumatic event and you get worked up for 5 hours because you almost crashed your car, but you didn't. And then 5 hours later, you come back down. Well, if you carry allostatic load too long, or you have an extreme traumatic event as in war or sexual assault, what happens is when that NGF comes in from the brain, it stays on. And where you now had 4 nerves, this is how we think it works. Now you have 12 or 16. And so you're stuck on all the time. You're sitting there watching, Dancing with the Stars, and you're elevated all the time, 365, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So it's a really simple mechanism when you think about how it works. So they turn off that system with a simple local anesthetic. The nerve growth factor recedes, the norepinephrine recedes, then that extra sprouting can't maintain itself. And then you're just yourself again. And then your nervous system is just reacting, in a normal way, where something extreme has to happen for you to be elevated, and then you come back down again.
Well, I think something else that needs to be realized is that oftentimes people will try to compare traumas, and you will have folks that are like, it's like the Jaws scene where they're comparing scars on the boat. And, well, let me show you, I got one better than you. Trauma's trauma. And I think that for some of us who have been victims of trauma and multiple traumatic experiences, it's not a matter of we have the better trauma or we have the more significant trauma. I think that a lot of us just get better of hiding it than others do because we deal with it so long.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I didn't even know if the DSR would work because this thing started for me at birth. I was separated from my parents at birth. So right. I didn't have a baseline. I thought people just felt anxious all the time. I thought that was the human condition, like you had an arm.
Right.
I didn't know that you couldn't feel not that. Okay. But what's really profound about what you're saying is, there's a special forces colonel I work with that says that. He says, the nervous system is apathetic. It doesn't think. It reads everything the same way. It gets damaged the same way. And I used to get resented when people would say trauma is trauma because I'd been through something so extreme. But once I understood the science, I realized, oh my gosh, it's true, right? Literally. And also what's really, really important about what you just said, John, is, it's not even trauma. It's a biological change to the body. That is right, like a broken leg. It's not. And And so even, when we think of a trauma, a survivor, or you could even say the same thing about alcoholism. You could say, okay, well, that person's an addict. I don't believe there's such thing as an addict. I believe that, Gabor Mate talks about this. Like when you see somebody that's addicted to something, anything, it's just somebody trying to regulate their nervous system. We're all going to find a way to do it. Right. We're going to find a way to do it, whether it's through weed, bourbon, which is my favorite way.
Well, I like the fire. So.
Yeah. Okay, good wine, psychotropics, right? Some of those things hurt us and some of those things don't. I think when the science comes in on psilocybin, we're going to find out that works like ketamine. Ketamine is like fertilizer for nerve growth in the brain. It literally remediates the brain, right?
Did you see that a Navy SEAL has actually become the first person legally, besides a university, able to grow it and study psilocybin?
No, but I think that's amazing. I think when the science comes in, we're gonna find out that it's like ketamine, which has been studied, where we do have a lot of data. So it's fascinating to me how there's certain things that we think like cannabis or THC actually ravages the brain, right? And then something that even more disassociative like ketamine or psilocybin is health food for the brain, remediates the brain. It's fascinating to me. So I'm just interested in what's hurting us and what's helping us. I
think that once we start getting away from these stigmas of, oh, weed is bad, it's going to make you it's the gateway to something else, or psilocybin, oh, that's only just for junkies and stuff like that. You start taking those stigmas away and you start doing actual clinical research into these things, and they're starting to find amazing potentials for them.
I don't begrudge anyone that does anything to calm their nervous system. I understand it. And also when you look at back to this addict thing, what an addict really is someone that's trying to deal with their trauma. So they bring in some outside thing to deal with their trauma. And in doing that, they create a biological change.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like Chad uses rage rooms instead of those other things. So
yeah. So we could call someone an addict, or we could say this person was trying to deal with their trauma, and then they created another physiological problem to try to solve a problem. That would be a more adequate, less judgmental way to describe what it is. And in fact, the person mischief, I'm practically quoting Daniel Amen one time. Right now, the person that just asked about Amen, Daniel Amen would say, when you take a psychotropic, even though he is a psychiatrist, or something else, and again, I'm not saying he never uses those things, but he tries not to. Or if you're taking a psychotropic or you're doing a line of coke, right? What Daniel Amen would say, who's a very well-known, maybe the most prominent psychiatrist, at least in terms of fame in the United States, he'd say to solve a problem, you're creating another problem. And rather than calling people addicts, which is a stigma, which is a judgment, I would just say there's a problem. There's a person that's tried to solve a biological trauma problem in the nervous system. And so now they extended the problem with their solution. Then you don't have to stigmatize anybody. It's a little more humane, I think.
There you go. And Daniel, I got to respect that just simply for that beard you got, brother. That's amazing. Daniel says, or remove the stigma, and the word addict is no longer judgmental. It's a descriptor. I think that's a pretty profound statement.
I just think anyway, are we do we have more questions, John?
Yep, we got some more.
Okay.
Well, I just posted one of them, but let's see here.
Okay.
Mona Englert would like to know, do you feel the DSR would help with other things like social anxiety, agoraphobia, etc.?
I don't think it would. From the bottom of my heart, I know it would. I believe, anxiety is a direct result of an overactive sympathetic nervous system. We're animals. Think of an animal. When an animal is wounded or injured, what do? They go and they isolate themselves and they hide. Your agoraphobia, I believe, would be radically reduced by the dual sympathetic reset.
I think that if we can get to the point where the stigma of this is taken away and it becomes more recognized and more accepted, I think that we're also going to find that the price is dropping, because that's been one of the big questions, is like with Bobby Joe Kellogg, she's, saying how can I get it when I can't afford it? And, that's one of the sad things about it is that, there are certain limitations as to how this can be done. But, the more that this becomes more mainstream, the more that it's more accepted, the more it's recognized, I think the price is going to continue to start coming down. It's that's the problem with anything when it's, it's not new as the medication that's being used. It's new in the form of the treatment.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know where Bobby Joe is, but let me know and I'll see if there's a clinic in her area.
Battle Creek, Michigan.
I believe there's a place in Detroit.
Okay.
But, I would say that, we're talking about $2,000 to $3,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
The low end to the high end. And if you were to kind of amortize that over the pain of your life, or your weed budget or your bourbon budget, okay, it starts, and you look at it over, what it would do, what you spend on things to deal with your nervous system over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it becomes pennies.
I'm also wondering about things like care credit and stuff like that.
I don't think we're far away.
Right.
From insurance companies. I believe that there's some that have already started backing this on a wide scale. When the NYU study comes out, that's the first true MRI study. I think the military studied this. We have plenty of proof. But I think this NYU study is a really serious study. For the insurance companies, it's going to save them money. Right.
And Blake wants to know, he's been curious to ask, do you have to qualify for certain things in order to get this DSR treatment?
What's up, Blake? No, I think that if you go in and, there's various kind of exams that they give you to kind of test your anxiety or, how damaged you are. And I've never heard of someone that says, no matter what the score on that exam is, that says, hey, I'm really anxious all the time, that's been refused it ever. And even these guys in Oregon, if you're anywhere in the Northwest, please reach out to me. And they're way less expensive. And even those guys, they told me, I mean, this guy goes around the world teaching it. He just went to Italy and taught it. He teaches people how to do DSR. He teaches regularly in Minnesota. Doctors come there for a regular thing he does in Minnesota. He's done more than almost anybody else in the world. They don't really do payment plans at this clinic, but they're so moved. This doctor and his partners, his wife runs the clinic for him. They're so moved by what the DSR does for people's lives. It's the one thing where they'll sometimes pay payment plans because they know what it can do for somebody. So I do want anybody in the Northwest or that's willing to come to the Northwest, I
think that's
to reach out to me, and I will facilitate directly you getting treated by this clinic here in Portland.
I think that's a great sign of those doctors are living by the Hippocratic Oath, that they're trying to do what they can to make sure that these are available to people and trying to do it the right way. My question on this is, what kind of qualifications does the doctor need to have in order to perform these treatments?
Well, that's one of the reasons the book exists. I was nervous when, it was listen, it's been on a lot of media, and I was nervous that the word would get out on this thing. And then pain clinics would be doing it off of paper from 20 years ago the wrong way, giving poor outcomes, giving the treatment a bad repute. And one of the reasons why I wanted the book out there is because I wanted all the modern protocols to be in a very public place and to be ubiquitous, so that would not happen, so that there would be there would be a responsibility. Say, if you're not getting the DSR version of this thing, you're then you're not really getting it.
Right.
So what was the question again?
My question on it is you see things like the dermatologist in Atlanta who became a plastic surgeon.
The qualifications.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, mostly a lot of the times you see anesthesiologists doing this, but anyone that is a doctor that is highly trained in the use of needles can do this very well. Orthopedists can do this very well, and they do. Naturopath can do this very well, and they do. It's more being and then you could have a doctor who's more qualified and more trained than a naturopath that may be doing it off of an old paper, right? So I think it's more about getting someone that has enough training, that has the correct training to do the DSR, and that can, and I think there's
would be great for it, wouldn't he?
You're what?
A hematologist.
Yeah. So as long as someone is, they basically do the procedure using an ultrasound, and as long as it's somebody that has a significant medical training, some people kind of aren't into naturopaths because they feel like I like naturopaths because typically when I go see a naturopath, their first impulse is not to give me a drug. Their first impulse is to go, hey, Jamie, if you do this and this, take these vitamins or make this lifestyle choice differently, right, then you will then you can remediate your body without drugs. I mean, that's one thing about growing up the way that I did, not taking a pill for everything. I mean, we took a pill for nothing, right? We never took pills. I don't think I had I don't even think I had a Tylenol or an Advil until I was 20.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but now, I like that. So I think that there's a range of physicians, as long as they have significant medical training, you can look at their protocols on their website and be pretty certain. And if you're not certain, send me a message on Insta and I'll vet it for you.
Absolutely. And Miss Pillow says, thanks for the body of work. Has Jamie's book. We'll be looking for a treatment center in or near Sonoma County for a family member in need. Again, thank you. Cynthia wants to know, my son suffers from epilepsy due to a brain injury. Could DSR help him in those seizures?
That's a really good question.
That's a deep one.
Yeah, and I am unsure. I don't know. I mean, if you want to send me a message on Instagram, I will call one of the physicians that I'm working with that understands has a much better understanding of how the autonomic nervous system works, and I will ask them and then give you the answer.
Well, one thing I think that a lot of folks also need to realize, you know more about it than most people do, but it's still, you need a doctor who is going to know certain things that we're not going to know. They've been training for years.
But I mean, that's a great question. I mean, if I hear from this person or not, and I hope I do, I'm going to call the doc first thing tomorrow. I may not even send him a text tonight, ask him the epilepsy question, because I don't think it's the first time I've been asked that, and I've been curious about it myself.
And how do people get in touch with Jamie Mustard? I know how I get in touch with you, but how to
follow me on Instagram, and send me a message.
And
Instagram, I think Jamie _Mustard at Jamie _ JAMIE _MUSTARD.
There you go.
Mustard on the
now for everybody.
Mustard on the beat, yo.
Let's see. Let me pull up Insta so
nice.
we can have it right there. I generally I haven't used Instagram in so long it's not even funny for me. So but it's when we're talking about these things and we're talking about how it's going to be coming, it's getting more and more traction as it goes. I talk a lot about being a herpetologist, how I deal with venomous snakes and working for venom extraction institutes. And a lot of people are like, why on earth would you do that? Well, they're finding so many uses for the proteins in snake venom nowadays that previously people didn't think about. They're looking into non-narcotic pain relief. They're looking into, so many different examples that the proteins in the venom can be used. It's just, we've got to take the blinders off and stop looking at things in a certain way and start understanding that there is potential there that folks don't even know. And I think that the more that this becomes known and the more it becomes mainstream, there's going to be a whole lot more for it. And that is the correct Instagram. Let me pull it up. There we go, folks. And that is Jamie's Instagram. And as he said, it is at Jamie, JAMIE _ mustard, MUSTARD. And that's on Instagram. If you just do a search on there, that's one way that you can get in touch with Jamie, and also follow what's going on in his world and how he's doing it.
Yeah. One thing about what you just said, John, that I think is really important is, I grew up with all of these constructs, a lot of these kind of Lafayette constructs, and, and I believe them. And, and there's some of them are good. People don't just go and do this thing because it's all abuse. There's a lot of information in there and things that people, I've had experiences where I've seen a person go in there miserable, and 2 years later, they're more themselves. I've seen that. I hate to admit it, but I've seen it. Right. And I think for everyone, at some point, there begins to become a diminishing returns. Okay. But that being said, I think, how do I want to, I was given all these constructs. Some of them were true. Some of them were fantasy. Okay. Lafayette says himself that the way he defines hypnotism is truth, 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 lie. Truth, 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 lie. I think that's a good way to define his constructs as a whole. There is a lot of truth. Okay. And then he introduces the lie, and then he has you. I don't even know if he was aware of it. I think he was aware that he wanted to control his environment, and people were part of it. Okay. But when I came out of that and I believed all this stuff that was fantasy, my mind changed towards, well, what's true? So now when any presented with anything, I'm just like, well, what's true? And is there data to support it? And that's kind of how I interpret the world now, because I lived under fantasy. Now I want to see data. And now I want to ask myself constantly, is that true? And then I want to see the data. And that's kind of how I go about it at this point.
It's kind of sad that we are, that we have to live in a world like that, but that's how it's coming. Scooter Mom in Canada, you have the Stella Center has a location in Toronto. Scooter Mom was asking about anyone in the Toronto area that does it. And
they don't have one in Toronto?
They do.
Okay.
And, I just put the link in there for Scooter Mom.
Let me say this about the Stella Center. I'm very grateful to the Stella Center because they're focusing, I don't know that their focus is always on like the masses as I am. Mm-hmm. But they're the only institution that's trying to turn this into Starbucks all over the world. And for me, it's not enough to get the word out. If people don't have access, what's the point? Right. If people can't get all the modern protocols, because this thing was up until 10 years ago, it was 70% effective. Now with the right and left side, with all the modern just perfection of constant refinements. Now it's 85 to 95% relief in the worst symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And I'll say this, if you re-traumatize yourself, it comes back. If you've had extreme trauma, you might have to go do your right side again or but I'll say this, like from the first time I did it, the worst stuff, the stuff where I felt like that overwhelmed my body has never come back. So maybe it's not as ideal as it was in that first 6 months. I re-traumatized myself. I redid my right side. But if I'd not done that, it was never going to be like I was before I did it again, where which was really tough existence for me. And I think one mistake that people can make that get this, and this is the biggest message I have for people that get this, is once we've had it for 6 months, we can forget what it was like before. We become inured to the new self. And so if you get it and it's 6 months down the line, you're like, did this work? Think back to 2 years ago and how you would have responded to a similar situation or similar pressure in your life. And when you do that, you'll see it and be grateful.
Absolutely.
So practice gratitude. It's a majorly important technique for resilience.
I've got two really good questions for you, and I think this first one goes back to the history of the medication that's used. Doug wants to know if this might help with Parkinson's with the shakes.
Wow, I'm going to write these down. Epilepsy.
Wait till the next one comes up.
Parkinson's. Send me a message on that. I mean, when I hear about the shakes and Parkinson's, I'm not a scientist. I'm an artist that has a mediocre ability to understand data.
What was one of the first uses of this medication, though?
Was for tingling hands.
Yeah. And then they found that women that were going through the menopause, the effects it was having on them. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting, talking about someone with Parkinson's and the shakes. And I don't know fully about it, but I understand one of the first areas that they see it in Parkinson's patients is through the fingers and the hands. So I thought that was interesting compared to the,
I'm gonna be texting one of the docs tonight when I get off, because now I'm dying to know.
Make it work.
I did have a woman come up to me at a reading one time, an elderly woman that had gone to Chicago to get it, and she told me she had autoimmune. She told me that she had an 80% reduction in her POTS symptoms from doing it. So I hear, and the doc gave me an anecdote. One doc gave me an anecdotal example of somebody with schizophrenia did it and stopped hearing voices. I'm not trying to say it's a panacea, but I will say, because I don't think it is, but I do think is that the sympathetic nervous system is at the core of 80% of our anxieties and the way we feel. And I think the other 20% is brain health and the polyvagal nerve. So I think that it is actually truly at the root of tremendous of so many of the things that are ailing us. And I know that there's been massive innovations in it being used to treat long COVID in staggering ways, right? So it's not a panacea, but it is. That's what I would say.
This next question, I think, is gonna dig even deeper. So Mona, who I was telling you about, I sent you her information to contact. Mona's a paraplegic and T7 incomplete. The spinal cord was bruised, not cut. Sympathetic system is a mess. Do you think that might help her? And her Instagram isn't working. That's why she was asking me to send her contact info to you.
The answer is I don't know. I don't know. I don't. I'll say that what I'll say is that if you're a paraplegic, you're dealing with prolonged allostatic load, okay? Just from the stress of being in that condition or the accident that put you in that condition. So you're going to experience a tremendous amount of relief psychically or, physiologically from this. But I'm going, another note that I wrote down for the doc, and I'll reach out to you. I think we talked in one of these chats, Mona, and so I'll reach out to you directly. And John, I'll get your contact information from John.
And I sent it to you on Facebook there, so you have it there.
Okay.
And like I said, she is someone that look up to a lot. She's the type of work and the ideas that she's come up with are astounding. And when you hear some of them, I think you're going to have the same effect. So we're rolling up on 2 hours now.
Okay.
And so let's hear from Chadwick Von Hubbard. Chad, do you have any closing thoughts for us tonight? What do you think about what you've been hearing?
I was just very privileged and honored to be a part of this chat with Jamie. He's helping a lot of people, and I was very happy to be here.
Excellent. And Jamie, what kind of closing thoughts do you have for us?
Thanks, brother. Appreciate that. Yeah. I don't know. This one wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought you were going to come in and, we were going to be doing
vlog.
Yeah.
Poe ain't having that. Not in my house.
I'm just listen, it's not a lobotomy. Right. There are going to be some people that don't get helped by it. If you have, a lot of brain toxicity from drugs and alcohol that's extreme, or from traumatic brain injury, you may not feel I've had people with those conditions where the people around them feel the benefit, but they don't feel the benefit as much as someone that has like a super healthy brain, right? So there's going to be critics, and there's going to be a few people that it doesn't help, but 85 to 90% for the extreme symptoms, and for what the messages I get every day from around the world in terms of what it does for quality of life, it's worth it.
Let me say, I saw some folks bring up acupuncture in the chat there. And I used to go to a gentleman who was, when I started going to him, he was in his 80s, straight from China to here, couldn't speak English. His granddaughter had to do the translation. My back was tore up from an accident I'd been in, and that was the only relief I was getting. He passed away. I went to other people, and it didn't work for me. Nothing works for every single person out there, folks. That's the reality of it. Some people have things that it just doesn't, it's not going to work. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. But being scared and not getting a treatment that can help you, I think that you're going to cause more damage to yourself by not at least trying. And like Jamie said, yes, it may have taken care of a lot of the problems that you've had, but that doesn't mean you can't re-injure and have to go through it again.
Also, 85 to 90% in terms of medical success is staggeringly high. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't get much higher than that, right? So we're talking in terms of how we view medical, almost perfect. So if you're out there and you're listening to this, in terms of the extreme symptoms, the chances are, if you have them, it's going to help you.
Yeah. But, I just wanted to make the point that it's, if it doesn't, it's sad that it doesn't. But the fact is that you can't let fear that something may fail keep you from something that may turn your life completely around.
I agree. And one of the things and it also is tremendous for cognitive function. One of the things that we see a lot on brain scans for someone that's done it, like you'll see this very, very fast increased blood flow to the frontal cortex, which is associated with executive function. And we also know that TBI and drug and alcohol use, you'll see reduced blood flow to the frontal cortex from traumatic brain injury and brain toxicity. So I don't think, there's lots of modalities that exist. I'm a big believer in evidence-backed modalities. The way I look at it, this, I guess, is my closing thought, is this is the hardware. When we're doing therapy, these incredible therapeutics like EMDR or cognitive therapy or so many things, we're trying to run software on broken hardware. So if we fix the biological problem and then we continue on with the therapy and the therapeutics, whatever they are, I've heard example after example of how this just the therapy goes so much smoother, goes better, because you're not sitting there with a biological problem getting in the way all the time, a hardware problem. And the last thing I would say about that is, when you have an overactive sympathetic, everything's heightened. So if you're trying to use a therapy where you're going over these things that happen to you in a heightened state, it's going to go much smoother if you can bring down that hypervigilance, bring down that hyperarousal, turn off that movie, and then you're not triggering yourself as you're going through it. I've seen that, and that's powerful.
Yeah. Hey, folks, this has been, so many of you had been asking for an update. You wanted to know, and hopefully this has answered the questions that you've had. Jamie, thank you so much. And
can I say one last thing?
Certainly.
I'm working on people, I want people to know me for my art. That's what I'm about, making beautiful things. I have some, and as we get closer, I have some really, really beautiful things coming out next year where people can truly see my work as a fine artist, as a conceptual artist, that will have, that will be widely distributed. And so, in terms of an update on Jamie, that's why I'm tired. That's what I've been working on, is working on these beautiful, beautiful things that I'm creating that are supposed to be coming out, that are contracted to come out next year. And that's what I've been doing. And that's what I'm really elated about. And I'm really hoping that the beauty of these things will be more powerful than this thing that I didn't have any choice over, that I don't want to define me. I really, that's what I hope.
And you definitely, I want, when you're ready, you let me know, and we're going to blast the hell out of it on the internet to make sure everybody sees the art that you put out there.
Okay.
I'm an artist, and I think that art is a piece of your soul that you bring out through whatever works that you use, whether it's music, whether it's pen to paper, whether it's painting, sculpting. It's your soul. It's the essence of you being brought to life for others to see. And I think that art is probably one of the truest forms of self-expression that there are. So I support you 100% in that, and I will blast the hell out of it all over the internet. And there you go. I think Jennifer's got a great statement.
Thank you for the title for this, because Danny wants to do a show called Catch Up with Mustard.
Oh yeah, I'll do it.
Catch me up, yeah. Okay.
We'll do Catch Up with a K. Jamie, you are so much more than your past. It has made you who you are. Wear your scars with pride. I need this procedure and hope I can save the cash. I am wishing for the day you can get it with and health insurance. So I think that says it so well, is that yes, the scars that we have from our past have affected us, have brought us to a certain point, but we are so much more than our past. We grow, we find our way out, we fight our way out. And I think that what you're doing is something that is essential. It is needed. So many people need this that can't get it. And I thank you so much for bringing this to the forefront so that people know about it. I had no idea about this till I'd heard about you. And I heard that through Miriam. And then I see the Miriam that I talked to before she got the treatment, and the Miriam that I talk to now. And then the letter that you read from Miriam. That tells me what this is. Go ahead.
No, thank you.
And I truly consider it honored to call you friend and brother. I think that you are a remarkable soul that the world needs to see. I think that you are much stronger than anyone gives you credit for. And you are fighting a battle where you have multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar agencies, the pharmaceuticals, the insurance companies, and all that you have to go head to head with, and you have to fight with them literally in order to get something out there that people need. And I don't think you get enough credit for that as well. But I think it speaks of who you are, that you're willing to take the fight on because it's so important to you. And
Well,
go ahead.
let me say something nice to you, John. One of the reasons I'm always willing to talk to you, and I always enjoy talking to you, and I always say yes instantly without thinking about it, is because you're one of the few people that I've ever talked to in any capacity. I don't know if it's because you were a cop for 30 years or what it is about you as a human being that I feel understood what I went. I mean, I'm tired of trying to explain it to people, so I normally don't. And you're one of the few people that I didn't have to explain it to you. You understood the nuance of what I'd been through faster and quicker and deeper than almost anyone I've ever met. And so, in that, I'm really appreciative of you for that, because that would because it gives me, I experience relief from that. And that's, and I think that these other kids now, adults, we need it. We need for people to say that this really happened. We need people to stop trying to play it down. Doesn't mean that we have to, you get it. So again, and that's been just very powerful for me and helpful in my journey. And so thank you.
Oh,
thank Chad for being the Ed McMahon of the internet here, holding it down. Okay.
Have you been seeing his content?
No, I got to go. I mean, I watched some stuff. I went at the last time. I got to go. Okay. I got to go watch some Clearwater Chad.
When I hear Miriam sit there and talk about how she's been watching it and how it's just been cracking her up, it was just so nice to hear her enjoy something and have something make her laugh. I think that right there is a testament as to this treatment and to having you as a friend and helping her through this. And thank you so much every time you're on. And I don't want to. My thing is that having you on, I think, should be something special, because this isn't just, I agree that we need to get this out to everybody and everybody needs to know about it, but bringing you on, I think that it's one of those things. It's like that Sunday night special thing that we saw when we were kids.
Wow.
And I think that's why it's important that when you're here, we make it as big as we can. And I appreciate everything that you do and how you handle things and your willingness to stand up for those who can't.
All right.
I think
don't get used to it. double middle fingers and all, John.
I don't care if you flip everybody off for 2 hours. I don't care.
All right.
You be you, Jamie. That's how
I appreciate it, brother. You're too kind. And
I shoot from the hip. That's the thing is that I speak it. If I speak it, I mean it. I feel it. So that's why.
The most important response that I would give to that is I'm here to bring this to the masses, but even more, I'm here. I mean, I'm here for both. I don't want to say more, but
right.
I'm here for the kids the main reason I'm here is for the kids that I grew up with, for people to hear and acknowledge what happened to us. And I'm not just talking about the kids that were in the inner movement. I'm talking about any kid that might have been 4 years old where their parent told them they were, gave them a strange narrative and told them they were unimportant because they had to go save the planet. And what that does to a child mind. I'm here for that's what is on my mind. And that's who I'm here. I'm here to stand up. I'm not against anyone. I'm not even, sometimes I feel I'm not against, I'm here for myself and I'm here for them. That's why I'm here.
And that's something I don't talk about very often, but those are the things that keep me awake at night, is the thoughts of how do we stop this? How do we stop what they're doing to children, what they have done and what they continue to do? And
I don't think I'm going to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I have to. I mean, I don't think we will ever bring it down or whatever the goal is until what was done to these kids, now adults, is adequately acknowledged. And adequately acknowledged would be something like what you saw when the Prime Minister of Australia apologized to all of the Aboriginal people and created reparations. When I say reparations, I don't mean a check. There's lots of ways this can be fixed without lawsuits. How about an apology from this organization and an educational fund that these kids that didn't go to school could apply to get their lives on track? What the Aftermath is doing and what the SPTV Foundation is doing, they should be doing. They'd spend a lot less in settlements if they acknowledged what happened to us and helped us.
And how about bringing out the files so that those who have did these things can be brought to justice, which help bring another step of relief to the victims. That's if they just do the right thing, this would be so much easier all the way around.
Yeah.
But they're too locked in who they are and what they do. And it's amazing to me. But thank you.
So I don't wake up. Yeah. And the last thing is I don't wake up in the morning. Again, I'm so appreciative of all the people that are standing up, but I just want to be able to exist as myself. That's what and I want the kids I grew up with to be able to exist as themselves. That's it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And folks, as always, thank you so very much for being here, being part of this. Like I tell so many times, just being here, you are doing something, you are having an effect, you are helping. Hopefully, as with every other live, you've learned something, you've been entertained, you've found things out that you didn't think about before, you've brought questions to your mind that you didn't know about before, made you think, made you react, and helped us come together better as a community. Thank you so much for being here with us. I just looked, and my good friend Dave is live over at Gotta Love Thailand. So if y'all want to jump over there and do a room raid on Dave, you don't have to stay in for the full thing. Jump in, say howdy, hit the like button, just show some love. One of the things I absolutely love is the channels that are growing, the smaller channels. Let's get out there, show them some respect and some love, and let's take care of them as well. And as always, folks, life is short. You get one shot. Make it count.